Hello, and welcome to Callus Prep. Today we're going to be talking about concision and redundancy. And before we get into the passage, I just want to make a quick note about what I mean when we're talking about concision and redundancy. And both of these topics kind of boil down to the same idea that we don't want to be using excessive wordiness in our sentences. And so when you kind of encounter phrases that are too wordy, or maybe you've repeated yourself, you have to kind of find a way to obviously eliminate the repetition or to rephrase the sentence in such a way that it's a little bit more concise, a little bit more to the point without, again, kind of unnecessary additional information. All right, so let's take a look at the passage now. And I'd like you to pause the video, read through the passage, and see if you can find anywhere where the diction is, maybe not very concise, or maybe there's a redundancy, maybe I've repeated myself somewhere, and just see if you can find any place where the language is just a little bit too excessive. And then when you're ready, we'll start the video back up and talk about how to fix that and how to be a little bit more concise. Okay, so first we've got the name America derives from the name of an Italian, Amerigo Vespucci, who was born in Italy. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to look for redundancies and also kind of excessively wordy phrases when we're going through this passage. So here, when I've told you that Amerigo Vespucci is an Italian, and then I later say that he was born in Italy, what I've done is created a redundancy. I have given you one piece of information, and then later on I repeat that exact same information using slightly different phrasing. And the SAT does not like this. So whenever we see a redundancy, we just have to get rid of it. Again, this is all about making our diction concise and our overall passage very direct and to the point without excessive information. So since we have this redundancy, we just have to eliminate it and move the period up to end the sentence a little bit earlier. And that's really all you can do. When you have a redundancy, just get rid of one of the iterations of it, and that way the information is only presented once, so that way we're not being redundant. All right, next we have, hoping to discover a means of procuring a lucrative trade route, Vespucci joined several expeditions across the Atlantic Ocean. And here we have kind of this phrase, hoping to discover a means of procuring a lucrative trade route, which is very excessively wordy. And whenever you have these kind of bulky, big, excessive phrases, I like to kind of boil it down to the basic idea. What are we trying to say with that phrase? And in this case, we're trying to say that Vespucci is hoping to find a trade route. That's really the most concise phrasing we can say, is that he's hoping to find a trade route. And when you understand that, you can kind of see that there's really no need for a lot of this additional information. It just kind of makes the sentence sound, or makes the sentence sound a little bit fancier, but it adds no real substance. And again, on the SAT, we want to be concise. We want to use as few words as possible to express our ideas. So in this case, I'm actually going to eliminate a big part of that phrase so that it says, it directly, concisely says that Vespucci was hoping to discover a lucrative trade route. And again, when you have sort of this excessively bulky phrase, you're going to want to try and figure out what the basic idea is, and then find a way to express that idea a little bit more concisely, like we did here. Okay, next we have Vespucci studied the stars, followed the constellations, and recorded details about what he observed during these voyages. And again, we have repeated ourselves here. I said that Vespucci studied the stars, and then I also said that he followed the constellations. Well, really, both of those phrases tell us exactly the same information. And again, there's no need to repeat ourselves, so I'm just going to eliminate one of those, and that way we've only presented the information once, so it's a little bit more concise, and there are no redundancies. All right, next we have 2 of Vespucci's letters were published, and a German mapmaker used these letters to create the first map of the Western Hemisphere. And here we don't have any redundancies. We've never repeated ourselves, so that's good. And also the language is already very precise. There's no kind of fancy, flowery, fluffy, excessive wordiness. It's all pretty direct and to the point. So we're going to leave that sentence alone. And finally, we have, he labeled the landmass there America to honor the arduous journey undertaken by Vespucci. And again, we have kind of this excessively wordy phrase, to honor the arduous journey undertaken by Vespucci. And really, we want to boil it down again to that basic idea that the map maker is honoring Amerigo Vespucci. And sort of anything that, any additional information is really just extraneous. And so in this case, I'm just actually going to eliminate that, and we're just going to say that he labeled the landmass America to honor Vespucci. And that way we don't have kind of that bulky phrase that really it doesn't add any substance to the sentence. And again, when you encounter either concision or redundancy types of questions on the SAT, you're either going to want to eliminate the excessive wordiness or eliminate the redundancy, or find a way to express the same idea in fewer words, maybe in a way that's a little bit more direct and, of course, a little bit more concise. And that about does it for today's lecture, and we'll see you next time.